Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar and question and answer session. I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes to let everyone arrive, and then we'll get started. All right. Well, hopefully people will keep trickling in. We're going to get started here. We've got a really nice Q&A session with Simon and Brady to talk about some revisions to Brewing Foundation and the Brewing Control Chart. My name is Sierra. I'm a communications coordinator for the SCA. I will be in the background fielding your questions and passing them along to Brady and Simon, so you can send them to me throughout their short presentation. And then we're going to take care of those once they've gone through the revisions in just a couple slides. So you can do that in the question part of the webinar dashboard, and I will pass that along to them. So I will let Simon and Brady go ahead and introduce themselves right now. Thank you, guys.
Brady, happy for me to kick off? Okay, excellent. So just before we start, we just want to shout out to the contributors to the creators group. The contributors in the last 18 months have been Alessandro Galtieri, Anita Burtok, Dan Pabst, Ellen Gormans, Georgios Konstantinopoulos, Irina Blank, Joost Leopold, Kyuho Choi, Lara Hunter, Oles and Stebo, and Tim Sturck. So we just want to thank them for the contributions they've made in the update to this curriculum. So we could move to the first slide, please. And next slide, because that's just about us. Okay, so there's been a guidebook released, and the text you see on the screen now is basically taken from the guidebook. I just want to talk a little bit about the key updates to the curriculum. So the topics from the previous curriculum have been split into separate topics that now have more clearly defined objectives, and some of the key changes include Topic 2, sensory impact of species and process, which was part of the previous introduction to coffee topic. Device or culturally suitable ratios. One of the key things we wanted to address in the curriculum was making this curriculum more culturally diverse and more inclusive of brewing methods and brewing devices around the globe. And the brew analysis, so giving more clear definition of how to analyze brews at the foundational level, and the clarification on the difference between brewing methods and brewing devices. So we've used the Coffee Brewing Handbook to define what the brewing methods are and how different brewing devices fall into the different brewing method categories. Second slide, please. We've removed specific espresso knowledge from this curriculum because espresso is basically covered in barista skills. However, pressure brewing is discussed as a brewing method, as it is important that students understand the key aspects of all brewing methods and how they differ from each other. So we just want students to understand that espresso or pressure brewing is a brewing method, but we are no longer requiring that they know doses or flow rates or brewing temperatures specific for espresso. Then there's the brewing control chart, which I will now hand over to Brady.
Hi. Yes, this is one of the other big changes that we've made to this curriculum. Before we move into that, I wanted to jump back into one other thing that we haven't specifically called out here, but something that was a real priority for us that we heard. You know, we've gotten a lot of great feedback from the community that uses this curriculum in the past several years, and we really appreciate that feedback. And one of the things that we keep running across was folks not knowing what the source for a particular curriculum item was, or where some information came from, or what even they should be using as a reference to teach a particular section. Because as we all know, depending on which reference book you look at, somebody may do something completely differently. So one of the other intentional things that we did with this that we hope we appreciate is that we added specific references to specific. We culled that list down to just the very essential references that we feel like brewing ASTs should have and be using, and we tried to be very specific with what we were pointing to help you understand, hey, this is why this question is answered this way, and get a little bit more information for you to add to your classes. But so we hope that works for you and that helps. Now, onto the brewing control chart. This is another thing that really came out of a lot of course feedback. This course has been, or variations and predecessors of this course is from the legacy curriculums. One of the things we continuously run across was some difficulty in calculating, and especially when these are being taught in the US, units issues. And this was something that students and teachers have been looking for on our side of, on my side of the thing here. I've been getting requests for this for 4 or 5 years, and so this is something we finally were able to implement, going to a universal weight-based ratio instead of specific units. That makes it easier, it removes a calculation step. And also capturing something that was identified as a known issue with these charts in terms of how we were using them with scales several years ago, and that is the density of water. So that is the two main changes that we see to this chart. And it also represents, because we were dealing with two recommended ideal brewing standards with the two legacy organizations, we needed to bring those two together and make it, where we're all working to the same general recommendation suggested ideal. So those were kind of the objectives with this change. So.
Okay. The last key part to the update is the changes to the practical exam. So previously the students had to prepare 3 brews, and the descriptions for the brews were a little ambiguous. So now we've really made it quite specific that it's 1 automatic gravity brew, 1 manual gravity brew, and then 1 brew from a device of the student's choice. And that could include immersion, vacuum, boiling, pressure, but not espresso. So depending on the region that you're teaching in, you could choose to have a student or allow a student to brew an ibrick. You could allow a student to brew a siphon. So it's not just Western or what some people might call common brewing devices. This is just meant to be very, very inclusive for all brewing methods around the world. And in line with that, we're going to require that the AST now completes a score sheet during the practical exam. Now, the score sheets haven't been uploaded to the portal yet. They are coming, they're still in translation. The AST's score sheet is a checklist that ensures that the student is preparing brews according to the instructions provided by the AST during the course. Different score sheets will be provided for the various brewing methods that may be used in the practical exam. And each checklist covers the key steps involved in preparing a brew with the specified method, with scores for critical aspects more heavily weighted. So if it's something that's more important, it's going to attract a higher score. The student must still complete a worksheet for each brew prepared in the practical exam, and this worksheet has been updated and includes a section to be completed by the AST. This AST section is for analysis of the brew. That is, the AST will be measuring the student's brew with or has the option of measuring the student's brew with a refractometer and then charting it. It's not compulsory that the AST does this, it's just an option. The AST will also set solubles yield and solubles concentration targets for the student, but the student doesn't have to hit the targets. So the AST sets the targets, but the student doesn't have to hit them. The targets are purely for discussion and give the AST information that can be used to help communicate how the brew is affected by the various steps in the brewing process. It's purely a discussion tool. It is not mandatory that the AST uses this tool, but it's there as an option. So that pretty much sums up the changes that are coming, and we're now waiting for your questions. Unless Brady wants to add anything else.
I just wanted to add, since you said measurement, I think that's a great point. And talking about bringing the refractometer and measurement of coffee, you know, we have intentionally in brewing, as we're looking at the levels, we've intentionally built in this progression of usage of measurement tools. Idea being, you know, primarily we brew coffee to enjoy it and for other people to enjoy it. And so at the foundation level, our primary measurement tools that we want to emphasize as ASTs and we want our students to be really caring most about are our senses. So that is our primary, you know, aroma, taste, body, color. That's our measurement system that we are using at the foundation level. The student, we can obviously, you know, the student is going to be aware that there are other tools out there and we can speak to them, but that's not something we really want to get into at a high level until we get into the intermediate level. So please feel free to use them for your reference and talk about them, but emphasizing the importance of the sensory aspect of the finished brewed coffee. That's our main focus at the foundation level. See a question here. For the requirement for automatic brewers for the practical exam and recommended brewers. You know, we understand that the availability of equipment, especially at the foundation level, it's going to vary widely as you work in different areas of the world. I think at the foundation level, what we're looking for is relatively simple functionality. We're not looking, you don't need to necessarily be working with you know, a hard plumbed 220 volt twin Fetco brewer or anything necessarily that has a lot of complexity to it at the foundation level. So this could be something as simple as a pour over brewer, you know, a little 1 liter brewer, the style that a lot of ASTs use, I think ticks the box at the foundation level. Simon, what do you want to add something to that?
Well, as far as I know, there will be an equipment, a recommended equipment list that's going to be published and available for the ASTs. So it will give more detail on the type of automatic filter brewer for the foundation level. But as Brady said, I think so long as the brewer is at least going to meet the SCA, what was the Golden Cup standard, it would probably suffice. We can't go into brand names here. I don't think it's an appropriate forum for that.
All right, any other questions?
Well, we've got some time. Let's wander back to that brewing control chart again.
Sounds good.
Previous slide. This is something, so if you hadn't had a chance to see this yet, this is the new revision, the ratio-based brewing control chart. I give a little introduction as to what our motivation behind doing it was. But I want to talk about maybe some good ways to use this as a tool. There has definitely been, you know, a lot of the discussions online around this have centered around the idea that this is attempting to show us what coffee is good and what coffee is not. I want to kind of be very clear that's not our intention, and I don't know that that's necessarily the way that this can best be used in brewing classes. To me, this is a visual representation of the relationship between solubles concentration, solubles yield, coffee to water ratio. So it allows you to have a tool that you can use as you're exploring various levels of the essential elements of brewing. Grind, time, temperature, turbulence, the various things that you might be involved with that are going to increase or decrease the level of extraction. It kind of gives you a map so that you can work together and correlate to those, as you go, the appropriate measurement tool for the level, whether that's at foundation, you can use this to kind of start to talk to some of the sensory differences. We want to make sure that we are keeping the sensory aspect, the quality of the finished product at the center when we're talking about this. These numbers are very useful guides. This chart is a very useful tool to help us develop that understanding. A professional level brewer, a very good brewer, is going to have a really good understanding of what the correlation between, a level of extraction and a level of strength is going to have on a sensory aspect of a coffee. This is one way that we can help our students develop that. But it is not necessarily providing this is what we say is going to be the best cup of coffee ever. It is, I like to think about it as being a map, right? Or, using a GPS navigation on your phone. You don't plug in the address for a store and expect that your phone is going to walk you through the front door of the store. You might think that if it does its job right, it's going to get you to the parking lot of the shopping center, maybe that the store is in. But then we're expecting to use our senses to find where the store is, where the cafe is, to walk through the front door. So it can be a great way of showing us where more flavor and different flavors may be found relative to where we currently are, to help us figure out, okay, as we're exploring. You don't use a GPS probably to get home from work every day, but you may use it to find a new cafe. So as you're working with a new coffee maybe, or working with a new customer, it can be a tool to help you explore if you're feeling lost, but it's not going to necessarily show you the end destination. It just says, hey, this is usually something that we find works really well. But I like us to make sure that we're keeping this tool in perspective. It can be very useful when we use it kind of in that way, but it can be really controversial and problematic if we try to, use it to do something it wasn't intended. So
maybe also say something about the upper limit in the chart now.
Oh yeah, this is so brewing research is ongoing. Everyone's aware of a variety of things, but in the original, our primary source for brewing foundation level and upward, our primary source is the old classic coffee brewing handbook, and that remains our primary and best resource for this, at least the foundation module. There's a range of ideal, recommended, and acceptable strengths in here. And one of the things that we really, to make this tool more adaptable and more reflective of the various preferences that we're seeing in markets around various parts of the world using different devices, was the idea that, strength to a large part is dependent on a lot of culture variation, regional variation, device dependencies. And so we wanted to encourage folks to, if you're getting delicious coffee out of a brewing device and it's stronger than it's outside of the top of the box, that's great. That's fine. We don't want to discourage that. We obviously, there can be use in having a target box, because it may help some people learn how to use a device or learn how to taste their way around coffee. But we wanted to expand that upper range. We didn't want to go to a true, hey, you know what, the sky's the limit, you can make it as strong as you want sort of approach, just because that's not necessarily helpful in you kind of need to have some general guidelines. So we went back to what was suggested in the coffee brewing handbook as the maximum acceptable strength for coffee. That's the reason that chart range has been expanded up to the 1.8%, is that represents kind of the top of this is what's in the book. We needed a number to put for the top of the chart. So rather than just pick one at random or go with what had been done, we decided to make it represent something. So that represents what's listed in the book as kind of being the maximum acceptable strength for specialty coffee. Again, this is not meant to be prescriptive. We are using this as a tool to help people understand how to make coffee more delicious. But we definitely wanted to give it a little bit more room to make sure that we were reflecting more recent brewing trends as well as this classic recommendation. Hope that's clear. And
what about the 18 to 22% lines, Brady? Do you want to address those?
Sure. Yeah. That represents the current recommendation, historical recommendation, in terms of that is, as we look at the various available documentation, what has generally been recommended as the tastiest range for extractions for brewed coffee. And we do see those lines, going all the way up and going up even beyond this range of this chart. And I know that also tends to be somewhat reflective of some cultural variations, and frankly, it varies depending on the coffee you're using. But if we're looking at something that's meant to be, one reference that we can use for brewing classes, regardless of what coffee you're brewing or where you're using it, this is kind of where the range that we look for to suggest. But that's not to say that you can't have a coffee brewed at 21% or 23% and have it be delicious. It may well be, and we encourage. Go ahead.
So does that mean my 22.1% brew is not over extracted?
I got to work out your negatives here for a second. Does it mean it? No, it absolutely does not. What we wanted to mention, what we wanted to kind of give a nod to is that we want, as you're tasting a relatively typical specialty coffee brewed in a relatively typical way, we will find some commonality in flavors associated with
and also,
over and under.
Also in your typical coffee grinder.
Oh, yes, in your typical coffee grinder. Yes, that's leave it to the Australian to bring that up. Yes, so that doesn't mean that coffee extracted to 17% can't be delicious and is necessarily wrong, or that coffee at 22.1% is over extracted. Is not a hard line. Again, it's the map. It's kind of, this is where, maps by their nature, they don't represent the real world. They represent a simplification, a useful simplification of the real world to help us maybe find what we're looking for. They never capture every detail. It's not a satellite photo that we're going to use to say, okay, go around this blue car to the left and then take 6 paces and there's the front door of your cafe. It doesn't work like that. But in terms of a useful tool, please keep it to the intent that it was designed. This is a way of helping you visualize the exploration of coffees. Thanks for bringing that up, Simon.
Yo, Gwilym, in case you're watching.
Do we have any additional questions? Any overripe produce being hurled in our direction at this point?
Maybe we just, presented it
so
clearly that everyone is crystal clear, and they understood my Australian
at this time.
Outstanding.
Denise says clear as water.
Oh, excellent. Well, I would like to encourage everyone, excuse me, we are all fairly active on the AST Facebook group, and you can always send questions to education@, I believe, right? Yeah, you can send questions to education@. If you have any questions that come up later, feel free to ask. You know, we're here to, you know, Simon and I are volunteers, so we're spending our time developing and making this, along with a brilliant team of content creators that we have the joy to be working with. So we are volunteers, so we can't always necessarily respond in the timing that we'd like. But I know I personally get a lot of value out of the feedback that you provide on the various forums. So thank you all for that feedback. And if you do have questions, please feel free. Reach out, ask them on the Facebook group, send them to me in a PM, or email education@. And I know at least we're happy for it. So thank you.
That's right. Thank you so much, Simon and Brady. Thank you to all our attendees, everyone who's watching this recording after the fact, if you couldn't make this exact time. And like they said, don't hesitate to reach out with feedback or any questions you have about this. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.